Hello and welcome to Accessible Globe TV. Today we are talking about something we have spoken about again and again and again because it keeps being a problem, and that is travelling by air with a wheelchair. We'll talk about that today on Accessible Globe TV. It's something that continues to be a problem. It's in the news again this week. So I thought I'd tell you about all of the problems I've had while travelling with different airlines, because the statement has been made that perhaps it's better if we just travel with major airlines. Well, that doesn't always work either. Let me explain. Let's first talk about Qantas, my very favourite airline to travel with because they're fantastic. They allow me to take two wheelchairs, an electric wheelchair and a manual, and they really look after me. But nowadays, I can't, if I want to travel from, say, Sydney to Manila, or Sydney to Bangkok, or Sydney to LA, wherever, I've got to get to Sydney. And the Qantas jets that do the domestic travel are too small to take my electric wheelchair. So I can't use Qantas anymore unless I take a Jetstar flight to Sydney, and that just makes it much more difficult because I've got to take off the luggage in Sydney. I can't book it all the way through. I've got to look after it. It's just a nightmare. So even though Qantas are a major airline, there's just an example of how that can go just a little awry. We'll go to a more budget one, AirAsia, which is an airline that we used to go from Brisbane to Bangkok a number of times. What a great flight it was. What a great airline. But believe it or not, different airlines have different rules in each country. So I flew with AirAsia to Bangkok, direct from Brisbane. Fantastic. They took my big electric wheelchair. They were wonderful. I went to come home from Bangkok to Brisbane, and they said, so we can't deal with wheelchairs that are over 100 kilo in Bangkok. I said to myself, you're kidding me. I've come all the way here. My wheelchair is like 150 kilo. I've come all the way from Brisbane on your airline, but you're telling me that you can't take me home. They said, no, sir, we can take you home. We just can't load your wheelchair to go with you. And, well, what do? I was in Asia. I know the rules. You do not argue in Asia. You do not get upset. So we sat there for some time, and we couldn't come up with a solution. And they said to me, it says in the computer that your wheelchair is too heavy for us to load, and that's that. So I said, well, look, I might have a solution. Can you remove all the information about my wheelchair from the record? And they said, yes, sir. I said, can you do that? I said, now ask me all the specs on my wheelchair again. And they said, how high is it? And I told them, how wide is it? And they said, how much does it weigh? And I said, 100 kilos. And they put it in, and they were fine, and they loaded the chair. They just didn't want to do something that could get them into trouble. We found a way around it, but it shows how fraught with problems and danger traveling internationally can be on different airlines. That was AirAsia. Air New Guinea, that was a very budget airline, a very, very good price fare. We went from Brisbane to New Guinea, and then we went on a smaller plane from New Guinea to Manila. And they were terrific, except for being sure whether they were going to take the chair. I rang them a week before, I rang them the day before, and we got all the way to the gate in the airport, and they still had not told me whether they had, well, they hadn't decided whether they would load the chair because of batteries and so on, even though they were fully compliant. They did, and it was a great flight, but again, lots and lots of stress before I even got on the plane. Now we come to the big one, Jetstar Asia. Oh my goodness, let's go over that one. I was traveling with Qantas. I booked it with Qantas to go from Brisbane to Singapore, I think it was Brisbane to Singapore, and then onward from Singapore to Bangkok with AirAsia. Jetstar, with Jetstar Asia. And I rang a month before and I said to Qantas, will you take the booking? They said yes. I said, will Jetstar take the booking? They said yes. I rang a week before. They said yes. I sent them emails and got emails back. I rang them the day before and checked again. They said, yes, sir. I got to the airport in Brisbane and they said, Rod, we don't know if they'll load your chair on Jetstar Asia in Singapore. And I said, well, what can I do? Can you ring them and ask? So they rang them and they said, yes, they would. When I got off the plane in Singapore, I was met by the Qantas manager at the airport, and he said, Rod, they've said they won't upload your wheelchair. And I said, look, I've done everything. I've rung you countless times. I've done emails. They said, we know. Qantas were fantastic. They booked me an overnight hotel at Singapore airport, and they paid for a connecting flight to Bangkok with Silk Air, who were, I think, run by Singapore Airlines at the time. I think we've even got a Silk Air tile there. We might put it up and give them a plug. They were absolutely fantastic. And funnily enough, they were using exactly the same plane with exactly the same configuration that Jetstar Asia had said were too small for my electric wheelchair. Silk Air, Singapore Air, Qantas, they did an amazing job. But again, I was stuck overnight in Singapore. Then also with Jetstar Asia, I had the terrible time of going through Singapore again. I travelled Star Class to Singapore and then on to, I believe, Bangkok. When I got to Bangkok, they said, sir, you have to pay $10 US for us to help you get off the plane. There was a big hoo-ha last year about a lady saying she was asked to pay to get assistance to disembark a Jetstar Asia flight. Everyone said she made it up. She did not. They told me I must pay the money. I said, I don't have $10 US. They said, well, we're not going to help you off the plane. So what did we do? We argued a little bit. That time I did argue a little bit because I was a bit annoyed. They actually took me off the plane and escorted me to an ATM where I had to take out the money and give them the $10 US for my assistance, which is terrible. And I think it was also Jetstar Asia. I'm not sure. In Malaysia, I had trouble there because I hadn't paid extra. They didn't tell me I had to. And I couldn't get help from off the plane and to the luggage. And I spent an hour waiting for help while wheelchair buggies went past me carrying VIP passengers who could walk. Sounds like I'm being a great big whinger. I love travelling. I love going places. I'm trying to explain to you just how difficult it can be sometimes. I'd love to remember which airline this was, but I also had a time in Singapore where I had gone from Australia to Singapore, and the participating airline said they would not take my wheelchair. They would not load my wheelchair to go to my next destination. And I didn't know what to do, and we were talking and discussing it when the plane left the gate to take off. And I said to them, you can't do that. You've got my luggage on board. It's against the rules to take off with someone's luggage on board if they're not in the plane for security reasons. Well, panic ensued and the plane actually came back to the gate. Whereupon the pilot came out and said, what's going on? I explained it to him, and his words, load the damn chair, which they did, and he was very nice about it. One of the problems with things like that is it always seems like I'm the person holding up the flights. I feel guilty because the flight is delayed because of myself and my wheelchair. It's not my fault. I'm always at the airport either 3 or 4 hours before a flight, and I do my best to make sure that everything goes well. And look, honestly, in the airport and on the planes, most of the time people are great, but maybe this just explains how fraught with uncertainty traveling by air can be, and it doesn't need to be that way. The solution is more staff at the airports, shared by the different carriers. And just before I go, I will say one other thing. I almost forgot. Even when you're in an airport, Singapore airport, supposed to be the most progressive and accommodating airport in the world. I've had a layover in Singapore twice, once for 5 hours, once for 3 hours. The worst experience on layovers I've ever had. For 5 hours, I was put in a little room with no bathroom, no coffee, no way to get anything to eat. Nobody spoke to me, and they barely remembered to get me before the flight. I ended up being the last person on the plane. And if you think that's isolated, happened twice in the same airport. Don't let it stop you traveling. Be prepared. Do everything you can to cover your ass, if you'll pardon my language. Make sure that you have things in writing. Make sure that you are at the airport early, and things hopefully will go well for you. I know that was a bit of a rant today. Enjoy traveling, and we'll see you again soon on Accessible Globe TV. Don't forget, if you can, we would love you to subscribe and like our videos. It makes a difference and gets us viewed by a lot more people. Simple Solutions are one of the people who looks after us. They do NDIS services. Hello World Travel in Hervey Bay. They've helped us with a lot of our travel arrangements. Totally Mobile, also in Hervey Bay, which is where I live. They do mobility scooters and mobility aids, and they also look after us. And of course the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, without which I would not be able to make these videos. So I'm grateful to the government for the NDIS as well. Thanks again. See you soon on Accessible Globe TV.